You're listening to the AV-IT Amplifier. Each week, we'll feature voices and ideas that need to be amplified in the higher education and pro-AV IT communities. This show is brought to you by higheredav.com. And now here's your host, Ryan Gray.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in again to the AV-IT Amplifier. If you've tuned in, chances are it's Wednesday, and you know that without fail, we are here bringing you a show and a voice that you need to hear. And I'm very excited today because I get to talk to somebody I've known. I was thinking about it I was thinking somebody I've known for quite a while, but actually not as long, I think, as it seems that we've known each other. But I can at least say we have the proud credit of presenting together at Infocom. So what more do you need to know that that there is a bond that cannot be broken here? So Craig, thank you for being on the show. Would you please tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Great. First, Ryan, thank you very much for having me on the show. It's an honor and a privilege, and I hope I live up to everyone's expectations. So please lower your expectations now.
I was going to say, first, I can clear that there are no expectations around here. It's tomfoolery end to end. So
excellent. We'll be right on task then. So my name is Craig Underwood. I'm the director of AV engineering at Moravian University in eastern Pennsylvania. We're about an hour north of Philadelphia. For those of you that aren't, they're like, are you by Pittsburgh or Harrisburg? Or if you don't know where any of those are, that's okay. We're Philly, as they say. But, yeah.
Pennsylvania is a pretty big state, all in all, compared to other states around it, right? Like Delaware, you can get from end to end in no time.
Very true.
Pennsylvania, Philly, and Pittsburgh are quite a ways away.
Yeah, it takes about 5 hours-ish, 4 if you're, a very heavy foot on the
That's like an Arizona-sized state, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, welcome. Thank you. First off, so I have a couple things to start with, but sure. Moravian University, not Moravian, as I have spelled it every once in a while in the past. How long have you been at...
We've got all kinds of different spellings, so it's okay. We're used to it.
How long have you been at Moravian? What was your path for showing up there?
All right, well, I've been here at Moravian for just over 19 years now.
Yeah.
May 2nd was my 19-year anniversary. So I had kind of an interesting path getting here. So I guess it all depends on how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole. But short version is my alma mater is Lebanon Valley College, another tiny college, which most of your listeners may not have heard of, which is fine. That's in central Pennsylvania, nearby Hershey, where they make all the chocolate. So it's great. And on a good day, the wind would be coming from the west towards the east, and you would smell the chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
On a not-so-good day, the wind would be coming from another direction, and you would smell the cows that would contribute the milk to the chocolate. So usually the wind was not as cooperative, but... Anyhow, so my undergrad degree is in music recording technology. So I originally wanted to do studio work, and that's what I did when I graduated. I did some audio post-production, did a show called Forensic Files. You may have heard of it, which is an awful lot of fun. And then after that, I worked for an integrator, stumbled into that, and then the integrator did a job for Moravian, and then ended up at Moravian through that relationship there. So that's the short version.
Nice. Nice. So what is the secret for being successful at the same campus for 19 years?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think it's just being agile and listening to what the needs are, recognizing the needs, and being able to shift with the changing times. I often tell people that the job I started at is not the job I have now, because when I started, there were maybe about a dozen, what they would call smart classrooms. Remember when they were called that? It's like, ooh, they're so smart.
Yeah.
You can push a button, things happen, right? So there were, 12 of them, maybe 15 on campus, and that's it. And now we have over 130, probably close to 140 spaces that have some kind of technology that I'm responsible for maintaining and keeping all that. So, but we'd be deploying projectors and doing all this sort of thing, but we don't really deploy projectors. We install them. We went from a provider of, setting up and tearing down to like, well, let's install this. And so we would learn as we go. And we've been doing in-house integration like before it was really called in-house integration. We just sort of did it, and we found out, hey, there's a name for this stuff, But I guess the point of what I'm trying to say is that things change, the job changes. It's not boring. I tend to get bored pretty easily. I like doing things differently. Like if I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again, I'm like, okay, that's fun, but let me try something else. So in this job, it's never the same thing. There's always something new. Whether it's good or bad, being thrown a curveball, it's like, oh, okay, well, we'll just deal with that and we'll figure it out. So that's kind of why I've stuck around, and thankfully they've stuck by me, and here we are. So
the only consistency is change, or whatever, right? The only constant is change,
yes,
and being ready to roll with it through different. Yeah, no, there's I've one of the things I say to people around here, because there are people who've been at Yavapai College a long time. I'm 11 years now, which is a little crazy for me to think, because I still feel like the new guy. But that's what I say. The relationship between you and your institution is sort of like the cliche they say about a long marriage, right? You still have to choose each other every day. And so if you're still like, you still choose to come to this place every day, then let's get down to business of what that means. You know what I'm saying? But don't ever get yourself into a place where it's a default. Make sure it's an active decision every time.
Right. And the thing that keeps me going are really the relationships we have with the faculty and the students that really just make it worthwhile. You can see that, okay, I'm having an effect because I'm putting in a system that helps somebody do something easier. Whether it's, the students that won't be able to come in with their Xbox or PlayStation, or more popularly their Nintendo Switch. They want to plug it in and show it on the big screen and play around on the weekends, or just having an event work just a little bit more smoothly, and just making it go off a little bit better. It's rewarding, to be able to build something and see something that you've built and have it have a positive impact. So that's rewarding, and it just kind of keeps me going.
Yeah, it's better than building a widget and sending it out the door of a warehouse and never getting to see it. We get to live the whole life cycle and see students use it. And I agree. You got to have a little reinforcement of the product of your work, I think, to stay engaged on it, which is something that we get to have.
Yes, absolutely. Cool. And like I said, we just keep getting new and different things thrown our way, whether it's a new technology or a new way of doing things that's more efficient. So you have to learn how to do that. Like, I consider myself I don't want to say a network engineer, because network engineer, no disrespect to network engineers by calling myself one, right? But dipping my toes into the network engineering world. So like I know enough to be able to communicate with other folks, but that's something I didn't know about when I first started. So now I do know about it, and it's like, oh, okay, that's something I know. And it was fun learning about that. And it's just a way to keep learning and, have some fun at it. So
stay on your toes.
Yeah, always.
Nice. Okay. So, well, that'll tag into one of the things. So, most people probably can just infer that not a lot of prep work is done for this show. You know what I'm saying? But every once in a while, I'll pull something out. So, I emailed Craig one question ahead of time, which was his thesis for success in the AV industry. So I'll read what you sent back, which, again, there is no wrong answer to this question, but it gives us a couple things to dive into and unpack, and which is really one of the things I wanted to do with you as you know what I'm saying, talk about an AV veteran. I know that the term Godfather has already been given to somebody else, so maybe we'll come up with another one. But it's also why I start with the question of like, what does success look like over 19 years at the same institution? Because I think you've got a lot of perspective to share, especially with people who are maybe on the younger or the starting side of their career, or people like me who think they're younger than they are and still think they're on the starting side of their career. But what you said was the formula for success in AV includes staying humble, being curious, being persistent, and finding a way to pay it forward, which I love, because that could be the formula for success in a lot of different areas and industries, not just here. So I love how it ties everything together. So let's take those down. And I'll take them out of order, because you were just talking about, you have to be nimble, you have to change. You know, 19 years ago, you didn't need to be a network engineer to be a high-level AV engineer, and now you definitely do. So
Right.
the number 2 thing on your list is being curious. So when you think about yourself and being curious, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think there's a number of ways that you could define curiosity. Well, of course, the first way is just being curious about the new technology and thinking, okay, well, this is a tool. How can I use this tool to do what I do better, or to help people communicate better, or to serve a purpose, right? So I tend to step back and think of like, oh, well, this device, it's a tool that does something. Does it do it better than some other way or some other tool? So when you look at things that way, instead of, oh, this thing has 8 outputs and HDCP and blah, 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 it's like, all right, well, what does that really mean? Like, what does it do? How does it benefit the design, or does it allow you to do something in a different way that ultimately benefits? So being curious that way. But curious also in terms of helping you troubleshoot things. Like if you have to reboot some device every week, you could either just schedule a reboot every day and call it a day, and then the problem goes away because it just reboots. Or you could think, all right, well, why do I have to reboot this? Like, what's causing that? And why is this creating a problem? So then, well, let me dig into this problem. And then by doing so, you tend to learn more about what's really going on under the hood so that you can be a better designer or programmer or you name it, right? So just being curious about things and just having that, I don't know, thirst for knowledge, wanting to learn more. Because I think without that, if people want to simply learn something and then just apply it and be done with it, AV is probably not the right thing for you, because you have to keep learning and you have to want to be curious about things to keep going. I mean, just maintaining my same job, like I said, I've had to reinvent what I do, I don't know how many times, right?
Multiple times. So, okay, then to dive in on 2 things there. First, you talked a little bit, which I love at the beginning, is sort of like, not just what can something do, but or what is it designed to do? What do the specs tell me? How many bells and whistles and features, but what all can it do? And look at it from the end result of what's possible. I think is a great way to stay curious about things. And I'm the same way. I get arguments every once in a while with manufacturers. I'm like, oh, I'm looking at using this thing this way. They're like, oh, well, it wasn't designed to do that. I'm like, great, I don't care. It's like a Apollo 13. I don't care what it was designed to do. I care what it can do, because you built this thing for a corporate environment, and that's not what I need. So giving yourself the ability to expand your curiosity besides what are people making for me, but what sort of Voltron things can I make out of these parts? But then you talk about kind of the need. Would you say that curiosity and maintaining it is something that is an active process for you, or just something that you're sort of innate and born with this sense of curiosity? Does it expand to other areas of your life where you find, oh, I find curiosity all over the place and I'm just applying it here? Or you go, no, this is part of the discipline of my profession, and here is the method by which I rekindle that as a key part of success?
Well, I think I'm really fortunate that I kind of fell into a profession that requires traits of my personality. I mean, I can go back being a kid, just always being curious about how things worked, like taking things apart. My dad was a software engineer and always like tinkered with things. So like he was one of the first people to get a VCR. So we'd take a VCR and we'd like take the lid off and like, well, how does this thing work? Oh, cool. Well, why is this, we'd figure out how things work. I've been building PCs since I was in the 5th or 6th grade. Just a long time ago. So like late 80s. I can remember going down to like one of the local computer stores and buying motherboards and memory chips and CPUs and like putting it all together and then like loading Windows, or DOS, I should say, and then Windows 3.1 and all this. So I mean, you just, like I said, it kind of goes way back now that I think about it, just being curious. In a total different direction, I was like, I like cars. I've always really enjoyed, working on cars, doing car maintenance. So when I was in 10th grade, I bought this this 1979 MG Midget that was just sitting in a field. It didn't run. And I'm like, I'm going to take this back, throw it in the garage, and just like start tearing it apart and playing around with it because I want to see how it works. And I ended up getting it running, who knows, without blowing up anything. And just things like that. I'm like, oh, that's really fun, just trying to take things apart. So to answer your question, to me, it's kind of baked in to my personality. If that's not, then I can understand how that might be challenging to some folks, but or stressful. But I don't know.
But I think most people, I mean, like you said, there's, you can say, oh, I'm fortunate to have landed in a place that, uses but people self-select for stuff like that. And people who work broadly in technology who kind of aren't, I need to tinker and see how it works sort of people, you know what I'm saying, struggle a little bit, I think, because you do kind of need to get to the root bottom, find the bug in the program and do it to be successful in the long term. So one final follow-up on that, then, do you see the world in an exploded view? Like when you see that car, does your brain immediately just go whoosh and blow it apart into its component areas? You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's an interesting way of thinking about it now. But I just like to think, all right, well, like if I press the brake pedal, what's happening? Like, what does that do? And then it's pushing this thing, which that, and it does this, and it sends the brake fluid in. It's a hydraulic thing, and then it squeezes the caliper, and to me, that's just kind of interesting. Like, wow, somebody thought that up. And then designed it and then built it, and then it's reliable and it actually works and it stops the car.
And we've basically been doing it the same way for a long time.
Right, I appreciate the creativity in a lot of it. I think that's part of it too, is just being creative. I mean, because before I even went into audio music production, my original goal was to be like a music teacher. I was a trumpet player, played the drums, very musical. I was in the choir, I was in the orchestra, I did all this stuff in high school. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a music teacher, right? Because everyone wants to be like their high school band teacher, right? Because that was a huge influence on my life. Shout out to Harry Bauer, my band teacher. He probably won't ever hear this, but that's okay.
Let's find him on Twitter.
But if he does, then he'll hear the shout out. But
all right.
But just taking that creativity that goes along with music and being able to apply that maybe in a different way, because I recognized pretty early on, I'm like, I'm not really good enough to make a living at music, and that's okay, right? So I'm like, well, maybe I can record music and help other people make music, and then I'm like, oh, okay, because I have the technology side, really enjoyed that. So, and then falling into AV from there, right? So I still get to use that creativity, which I love.
Nice. All right. Well, we'll continue to I like this. So now when I'm stumped about how something is working, definitely go to Craig and say, hey, you know what I'm saying? Give me but I'm the same way. I love that. Like, I know when I push X, Y happens, but I don't take for granted that it does. Therefore, the understanding the path and the process is sort of cool, whether that be, like you said, a straightforward mechanical or hydraulic process or a highly intricate, OSI model layer of packets flying across the world. Something happens one way or the other. Cool. Okay, so then let's jump back to the first thing you said in here, which I assume was a direct shot at me, because of course everything is me. Number one, stay humble. And no one loves the sound of their own voice more than I do. So when you say stay humble, what do you mean by that?
I think I say stay humble because every time I've caught myself feeling arrogant or feeling like I know what's going on, like, oh, I know this, I can solve this, I have been immediately humbled by the fact that no, Craig, you don't know the solution to this problem, and I'm going to demonstrate that. So it's the world's way of making sure that, you still have things to learn. You don't know everything. You can still teach an old dog new tricks, me being the old dog. I'm not calling you an old dog. No.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you
young
for
dog.
that. Yeah. No, I'm real. I'm real. So then because it's kind of interesting to me in the overall world, I don't know if people would look at AV people as being like, oh yeah, those stuck up AV people over there. You know what I'm saying? But within our worlds, there are definitely like either between the need for people to sort of talk about their intelligence or their experience can get into a mode of like, oh, I know everything there is. Therefore, when anybody says something, my number one thing to do is say, well, actually, and then cite some specification thing that says, you don't know what you're talking about. Showing my importance by belittling someone else's importance. And that's always been a huge turnoff for me in tech. It exists in all area of tech, but like early in my career was like live sound people and stuff like that. Oh, have you ever used the blah, 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 blah board? Well, it's more complicated than this one. And mama, that sort of thing. So I would certainly you have always struck me as somebody who is humble and gracious. So I'm curious, is this something that you've said, no, this is the same thing, an innate part of me that's helped me be successful, or something you've had to work on and develop?
Well, I think it's, I like to think that, when I really dive into something and I do it, I want to do it well. I want to try and do it the best way possible. So, because I have pride in my work, and I want to say, oh, yeah, I did this, and this, I did a good job, Mm-hmm. So, but, you have to be careful not to be like, well, I did the best job ever, right? Like, because it's easy to be like, oh, I'm really proud of my work. But there's a difference between taking pride in your work and then being boastful. I really try not to be boastful, and sometimes it can come off as that. So I tend to just not say things then, which is why that, you don't see me on social media a whole lot, but, maybe I should be out there more. But anyway, I think one example I have of, staying humble is when I was in college, I did an internship on a film set, 2 film sets actually, the summer of my junior year. And so by that point, my junior year, I'm like, okay, I know a lot about audio. Oh, yeah, I can jump in. I'm ready. I'm prepared, So I jump in. I get in this film set, and like everything is completely foreign. So I'm coming from a studio background, and then now I'm on film production where the tools, even the microphones, they're like, oh, wait, we have this thing called like T-Power. I'm like, T-Power? What the... I've heard of phantom power. What's the, like, oh, if you plug them in wrong, it'll blow the whole thing up. And they're just completely different equipment. And like all these things, I was immediately humbled, like, ooh, I thought I knew a lot about audio, but I don't know anything about this application of audio. So that was a really early wake-up call to say, okay, recognize that you don't know about a lot of things. And so that whole phrase of knowing what you don't know, I recognize that there are experts in other fields. And so I know enough when to ask for help in another field. Even though if I know something about acoustics, I know when to call an acoustical engineer for help on things because I can't solve that problem. Yeah. And being humble, like, oh, I can solve this problem. And one time a work study here at Moravian, had called me like, Craig, this I'm just not getting sound out of a mixer. It's like there's distortion, whatever it was. The problem was, oh, I can go in and fix that. Went in to try and fix. I'm like, ooh, wait, I can't fix this. There's something going on. Like I thought I knew exactly what the solution was. And so, just reminding like, no, Craig, you don't know exactly what the problem is until you experience it. Like just take it step by step. Remember, don't make assumptions. So, and so when I consciously think, okay, step back, think through it logically. You might think you know the answer, but let's go through and confirm that. Instead of being, oh, I know the answer. So, staying humble has served me well, and I've learned that lesson. And I try and tell my students that too. When I teach at Lebanon Valley College, which I've been teaching there for almost like 20 years, in their audio program, I'm like, hey, look, you're going to learn by mistakes, so just stay humble and recognize that use those as learning experiences. So you're gonna have a lot of them, but let me share mine. Let me share my failures so that you can hopefully avoid them. Right.
And I love how those first two tie together, right? Being humble lets you be curious because people who aren't humble aren't very curious about what they don't know or what they can't reach, and that begins so sort of that pathway. I just love how you've got them married together in that way. Okay, number 3, being persistent. What does being persistent mean?
I think of that in just in a way, sort of self-explanatory. So if you run into a problem, if you're troubleshooting, just keep digging to find, that kind of goes hand in hand with being curious, right? Because I'm thinking, well, if you're successful in AV, you have to be persistent in making sure that you get the right thing in integration. There's so many different things that can go wrong. So just having that spirit of not giving up and thinking, all right, there's got to be a right way to do this, or another way to do this. Like I'm thinking live events too. Oh, if something goes wrong, well, the show's over. No, you can't do that. So obviously you have to be persistent and think ahead, 3 steps. Like, well, what if this thing fails? What's my backup? And if that goes bad, what's my backup? So kind of always having that churning in your head to think, how can I solve another problem? And just being persistent in solving problems and not, to go back to what I said earlier about, well, let's just reboot the device once a week. Well, let's be persistent in actually solving the problem permanently for a better experience for everybody.
Yeah.
So
don't be satisfied with the workaround. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Get all the way to the bottom of the thing. So the biggest challenge for the challenge of persistence is frustration, right? So how do you? I mean, I feel like we're getting back into this same, like, being humble and being curious gives some of this answer. So how do you deal with, you're showing persistence into a problem, but just not getting to the bottom of it. You're spending time and cycle and not getting to the end result you're looking for. How do you keep from the, flip the table moment where you just go, flip the table and walk away?
I will say oftentimes, you heard, of course, everyone knows the expression RTFM, read the manual, right? Sometimes we're like, wait, did I read? What does the manual have to? Oh, if I just followed the manual, I'd be out of the problem right now, or I would have had at least a better clue, right? So, again, staying humble and be like, I don't need the instructions. Yes, you do need the instructions. Read the manual, see what it has to say, go to there first. And not being like, well, I can just assume I know everything about this device, right? So I think all of these just sort of play into each other, right? But yeah, when I was thinking about that, it was just more of my mind was on troubleshooting when I thought of persistence.
Yeah.
So.
No, and I think that's a key part of success for everybody, especially as they grow up, which is, and here this will wax philosophical, but I think in your youth there is a desire to, you're supposed to test and figure out new things and try different, like, understand your path. When you're on your path, be persistent to what you're going to in those small and the large thing. If you have got a long-term goal, it is the people who achieve them is the people who are persistent towards them, knowing that stumbling blocks are in the way, knowing that challenges will come, and rolling through that. Or the small thing, which is like, I've tried this, I've tried that, I've tried this thing just isn't ever going to work. The system just isn't ever going to work. And to go, okay, step back, open my mind to the part that I'm not thinking of instead of the,
right.
It's difficult. It's difficult.
Because there's always another solution, right? Like there's always another way to get the same thing done. And so when I'm ready to flip the table, I just think, all right, I know how it feels when I solve a problem like this. I'm like, yes, thank you. Oh, I got it working. Like, that's a great feeling, right? When you're like, I cracked the code. It's like, solving, a really difficult crossword puzzle or something like, or some logic puzzle or thing like that. I don't know. Some people get great joy out of doing Sudoku or like the number puzzles. I'm like, that just drives me nuts. I can't figure that out. I'm like, AV, I can figure out. So even if I want to flip the table, I know there's some way I'm going to figure this out. It's really frustrating now, but I'm going to figure out something. So that I just keep telling myself that. There's a dopamine hit
coming at the end of this process. Yes. You know what I'm saying?
So like eventually I'll have something figured out and then it will be very good. So, let's like that's kind of what keeps me going there.
Nice. Cool. And finally, find a way to pay it forward.
That, I think, is recognizing that so many people have helped me on my road to get here, and that I have learned from people that have been generous enough to share their knowledge and their tricks of the trade, their techniques, their secret workarounds or whatever else. And so I think we have a responsibility to the industry to share that with others and to uplift others and help them go along. So, of course, HETMA, hello, which is a perfect way of doing that, with the PRISM scholarship and everything, and just people helping each other. But I found an enormous amount of satisfaction in just teaching. I've been teaching at, like I said, Lebanon Valley College, my alma mater, for it's like over 20 years now as an adjunct. Like every Thursday night in the fall, I drive out there and teach a class in audio system design. And I try and share my experiences with the students, try and keep the curriculum as relevant as possible to say, like, look, this is what you need to know. This is what's nice to know, but just really getting them on board with, and showing them that, hey, there's not just this studio pathway or the traditional, live sound, be a roadie, go into a studio. Of course, the music industry has changed,
a ton.
To say it's changed over 20 years is like the understatement of the century.
Yeah.
But just showing them that there are so many more career paths in audio that involve the same skills, like in AV, right? Which I didn't even know about until I kind of fell into it. And so if I can let people know that this industry even exists and that there are good careers and there's great people, and you don't have to move to Nashville or LA or New York City. I mean, you can if you want to, if you like the city life, that's great. But it's not like, oh, this is the hub of where this stuff happens. If you want to go into recording, you got to go to Nashville. It's like, all right, well, maybe that's not for everybody. But here, I can be around Philly. There's people in Arizona. There's people in, anywhere, all around the world that can just be where they are and contribute to the industry and make a pretty good living, I think. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I love, like I said, this is the exact sort of conversations I love coming for, which is this. And I'll just make that last tie-in, which is, I think it takes, humility and being humble is tied into making sure that you uplift others. You pay it forward and show that, my greatest success will be what I accomplish. But with those, I invest in what they can accomplish. You know what I'm saying? That's what do you want written on your headstone type piece of wisdom that I think I appreciate you sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, I just, like I said, I hope to pay it forward, and I hope to help others out because it just feels good to help people out, right? So what other motivation do you need? Right?
All right. Well, then, Craig, thank you for sharing all of those things with us. If there was someone who heard and thought, I think there's a way this person might be able to help me out, how would people find or get in contact with you?
Probably the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. Just search for Craig Underwood. There aren't too many of us. I think I have CTS in my title, so if in the search list, Craig Underwood CTS, Moravian University pops up, hey, click connect and let's chat. Yeah, happy to talk with anybody about anything.
I would encourage everybody to do so because I think Craig's a fountain of wisdom, both technical and otherwise.
You're too kind.
Tell me I'm wrong. You know what I'm saying? I challenge anyone out there to tell me I'm wrong about that. Craig, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian.
Thank you for listening to the AV IT Amplifier. Tune in next week for more with today's guest. It'll be great or your money back. Your host has been Ryan Gray. He's on the tweeters at Ryan_A_Gray or find him on LinkedIn to connect. Please subscribe and give the show a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. This show is brought to you by higheredav.com. The views expressed here are not necessarily those of our respective institutions, employers, or sponsors. Everyone hang in there, go easy, and we'll be back next week.